And so I think I'm very interested in knowing what becoming a million people nation really means. So I'm very interested in having the views of different political parties, because I think it really affects all the residents in this country, not only the ones who were born here. So I hope you will enjoy the evening, and without further ado, I'll pass to Daniel Patient.
Welcome and good evening as well from the side of the British Chamber of Commerce. Really happy and honored to be able to co-organize this event together with the American Chamber of Commerce, Luxembourg Times, and thanks to ING to welcome us a second time. Again, a lot of interest, a lot of interesting questions probably going to be asked, and a lot of insights. So thanks to everyone for being here, and we're really happy to be part of this organization. Paul?
You can't do something like this without somebody's got pockets to go ahead and a location to go ahead and do that. Thank our friends from ING. Because let's be really straight, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be doing it. Okay, we're actually doing a little bit of a transition event, in the sense that the first event that we did was focused on the communal elections. And that was good. We went ahead and we did that. And now we're starting to do a little bit more of the transition to getting us into the national framework and what do we need as a nation. And at the same time to talk a little bit about the role of the foreigners and how do we work things out between foreigners and locals. And Luxembourg has had a great history as a melting pot. And it's been very successful for going ahead and being a melting pot. And you know, the Luxembourgish people are wonderful people, but it's only natural that sometimes they get a little bit concerned about having so many people in the country who come from someplace else, and how do we smooth that out? And then for the foreigners who are here, sometimes they say, yeah, we love Luxembourg and we like the Luxembourgish people, but we think the Luxembourgish people are occasionally a little bit standoffish. And, you know, we have to figure out how we can bridge the gap between both groups. Luxembourg would not be as successful as it is if it didn't have the wonderful Luxembourg people. But by the same token, it also wouldn't be as successful as it is if it didn't have a vibrant international community and the people who came from outside who are investing their hearts and their souls and their love for the country inside as new citizens. So we thought, how can we start making this transition on over? And the idea which was proposed by the Lux Times to go ahead and do an event that's focused on, well, what about things are going to be like if there are 1 million people living here? How the heck are we going to go ahead and do that? So that's tonight. And I know I'm keeping you from them, which is more important than me. And even better, I'm keeping you from networking and drinks later. So have a nice evening. We'll see you soon.
Good evening, everyone. Many thanks for coming to this event, and many thanks to our host, the ING, and also our partners, the American Chamber of Commerce and the British Chamber of Commerce, here for helping us set up this event. And also, naturally, many thanks to our esteemed guests and panelists who will be certain to have a very, very interesting discussion tonight about the main policy challenges facing Luxembourg in the years to come. As has already been said, Luxembourg is a rapidly growing but also increasingly international, multicultural country where foreigners make up half the population and even more of the workforce. So this is a great opportunity for us to involve the four main political parties. We'll start with those we accept as more views than those four, in a discussion about the main issues facing the country, and especially as far as the foreign population of the country is concerned, and the English language environment in the country. So yeah, many thanks for that. I'll introduce the panelists on the far right. We have Elisabeth, Margue, not politically, of course, of the Christian Democrats, the CSV. She's a party co-president. She's been a member of parliament since, I believe, last year. A lawyer by training and profession. Yeah, she'll be giving us the point of view of the CSV. Then next to Elisabeth Margue, we have Djuna of the Green Party. She's equally co-president of the Greens. She's also a member of parliament. She's been active in the non-profit sector a lot, and yeah, which is also an academic background to some extent, I believe. And so yeah, these are, and on the left we, sorry.
Yeah, I'll just continue. So good evening, I'm very happy to be here. So I'll introduce Yves Cruchten of the LSRP, so the Social Democrats. He has been member of the parliament since 2013. If we did our research correctly, he chairs the LSRP parliamentary group since January 2022. He has been chairing Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee since 2019, and he has also previously served as the party's President and General Secretary. He's also a councillor in Bacharange, so that's one of the... Schöffen, oh, he's a so... Yeah, he's elder man. Sorry. So then, to his left, we have Anne Deimes of the Liberal Democratic Party. She hails from the north of the country, and she is the deputy secretary of the party, if I'm right. She is a member of now Max Hahn's cabinet of the Family Integration and Greater Region Ministry, where she works in public relations and communications. She's a member of the cabinet there. Yeah, she studied literature and European studies. So just to give you a little frame, after the panel discussion, the audience should also get an opportunity to ask you, the politicians, questions that move them in the light of the elections. We plan about 15 to 30 minutes maximum for the audience then to ask the questions. And afterwards, we will have an opportunity, as Mr. Schoenberg already said, to exchange ideas over a drink and to socialize. So the panel will be moderated by both of us. So that's me, Ines Kurschat. Sorry if I start with so the donkey is always first. So Ines Kurschat, I'm the vice head of the politics pages of the Luxemburger Wort. And I'm very happy to see you.
And yeah, I'm Yannick Lambert, a political journalist at the Luxembourg Times. So I'll start with the first question to Elisabeth Margue. So economic growth is a stated policy goal of all main political parties in Luxembourg. What kind of growth does your party stand for? What kind of growth does your party want for the country?
So for the CSV, and let me just briefly explain, so the CSV is Centre Party, with a member of the European People's Party. So for the CSV, we think that it's important to have economic growth, and we have no choice in order to keep our pension system up. However, we need to decide what type of growth we would like to have, and we aim for an inclusive and a sustainable growth. Inclusive means for us that all the stakeholders that are actually involved in the creation of growth should also benefit from such growth. So that should also be the employees, that should not only be the shareholders, that should be the people, and not only the companies. Sustainable growth, of course, means for us a growth that does not destroy our natural resources and it does not harm the planet. So that is the two main aims we have when we talk about growth.
So sustainable growth, that sounds very much like something coming from a Green Party, of course. How do you assess such a take on economic growth? Or where does the Green Party differ now in terms of sustainability from the other parties?
Well, obviously, the country needs growth, and I think there we agree on. We have at the moment a social system that relies on it, even though my party strongly recommends to make it more sustainable. So we have to rework our pension system, and I think it's a topic where, well, it's not the most attractive one, but I think we have to tackle it in the next legislative period. But obviously, if we talk about sustainable growth, we as Greens Party think that we have to make it possible to organize our way of how we deal with our land resource, with our resources in general, talking about our woods, our plants, our green places within the country in a more sustainable way. So it's about how we organize growth as well. And there we have the PDAT, which is like a leading program proposed by Mr. Claude Turmes, which tackles this issue and
Minister.
Sorry, thanks. Yeah,
Just in case they don't know the minister.
Yeah, Minister Claude Thomas, who says basically we shouldn't be in a reaction towards growth, but we have to organize it, and we have to make priorities in terms of where do we have centers in our country where work is placed, where are our economical hubs within the country, where are living hubs, where are, let's say, shopping and free time spaces, so that our transport is organized accordingly, our housing system is working within it, our energy resources, and I think it's all interlinked, all these big challenges of our future, and so it's about organization, and I think there we have to make progress on.
So, and this question goes to Yves Cruchten. So the LSP is traditionally the party of the industrial south and the working class. So the growth in Luxembourg is very much driven by the financial sector, which is 1/3 of the country's GDP. What sort of economic growth does your party want for the country? Like, what sort of sectors should grow, and where should people be employed?
Thank you very much. I can, of course, agree to a lot of what has been said before. I am not so keen to put any adjectives in front of what growth I would like to have. I just think that every country aspires to have growth. Every country wants to have growth because we want to have prosperity. We want to evolve in a better way. What we are discussing very often in Luxembourg when we talk about growth is the negative consequences that we are facing with growth. Therefore it has had a very negative touch when we speak about growth, and we even have nowadays parties that openly say we don't want any more growth, which is crazy in my opinion, because it makes us not advance at all anymore if we stop to have growth. To your question precisely, of course we rely on our financial sector, and as a Labour Party we also support this and have been supporting our financial sector in the past decades. But of course we also want to keep some industrial activities in Luxembourg, which is more and more difficult. With all the restraints that we have to care for our environment, we have to care for our water resources and whatsoever. But we, as a party, want to keep industrial activity in this country.
May I just add a question there for you, Mr. Cruchten, because actually diversification of the economic system here and the economy in Luxembourg was already part of your program with the last, we could say the last 20 years maybe. And actually there were also some programs put in place. We had a whole evaluation. But where are we standing now? Would you say, because your party is part of the government, so have we achieved this kind of diversification? Especially if you look at the industrial sector, are you optimistic?
I'm not so much optimistic anymore when I see what has happened recently. We had a yogurt factory that after being discussed for a couple of years said no, they will probably build their factory on the other side of the border. We also have the discussions about the Google data center, which I cannot understand why we don't want to have a Google data center, but some people just seem to have a problem with it. But we should encourage all this. I agree with you. We have been fighting for diversification in our economy for the last 20 years, and we have had some successes. We have developed the logistics sector, for instance, but the growth of the financial sector is so enormously big that it consumes these little efforts that we did, these little successes that we could have in the past, and still the finance sector and the funds are still the biggest part of our economic sector.
Thank you. And this is a question for Deimes of the Liberal Democratic Party. So in order to have that sort of, to fuel that economic growth, Luxembourg needs a lot of qualified staff, and we're in competition internationally with all sorts of other countries, like even Canada, Germany, Australia, who are also trying to do the same. What would your party do to attract qualified people from abroad so we can run this economy, make it grow?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think much has been said so far, and knowing that Luxembourg creates, or in Luxembourg there's 10,000 jobs per year that are created, we know that we need growth to finance our pensions and to finance the social system, and the growth then also needs an extension of the infrastructure. And what we need is, well, it has been said before, sustainable growth, adapted infrastructure and innovation. And I think this should be done then by increasing productivity, which is an important lever for shaping a growth model qualitatively instead of purely quantitatively. But it shouldn't be at the expense of any social achievements that we have achieved so far. I'm talking about the index, but we should rather than try to put more efforts into digitalization and artificial intelligence to make this sector grow. But
how do you ensure that we attract the staff to fuel that sort of growth?
To Luxembourg? I think there's different ways to do that. For the time being, we have a very restrictive immigration model. I think that way more could be done. You mentioned Canada and Australia. There could be ways to attract people from countries that are not necessarily based in not European countries, but also from furthermore. That could be done through economic missions, for example, where you go on a mission and have the nation branding. I mean, there has been a lot of efforts in recent years about Luxembourg being promoted in the whole world. You could do this. You could have visa, work and travel visas. That could be a way to have temporary visas to work in Luxembourg, and there is also ways to do more than just having this economic missions that I'm talking about.
So a reform of the immigration system could be...
The reform of the immigration system, I'm just looking into my notes.
Okay. Well, I guess we have to move on to the next question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Also it's also be way more flexible for all that comes to work arrangements, and to attract people to have a more interesting, well, to be attractive actually for foreign workers coming to Luxembourg.
So my next question is about bureaucracy and procedures in the country, and this question is for the Green Party, because it's been in government for the past decade. And so the question is about simplifying procedures. What has your party concretely done, and how do you foresee improving that? There are complaints that getting subsidies for electric cars take too long, and that not everything is digitized. Where have you, I guess, failed, and what could you improve in the next couple of years?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I guess we have three parties who have been in the last decade in government. Obviously, I am smiling a bit because I know that some kind of, well, the whole procedural question is often linked to the Green Party, and I think we have to nuance this a little bit. First of all, I'm stating that the Luxembourgish government has been subsidizing the whole energy transition in a way that no other government has done it towards its inhabitants. Talking about, let's say, electric cars, talking about solar energy on our roofs, bikes, etc. Yes, it takes too much time to get the refunds. I'm with you. I've been waiting for it also over a year. So that's let's say the less good side of a success story, right? So well, yeah, we have to recruit more people to deal with all these procedures, obviously. But on the other side, the good thing is, well, there are substantial subsidies for private people, but also for our companies in this whole energetic transition, and this is a good thing. I think the recruitment of our fonctionnaires, of our the people working in the administration, is a challenge, and also there the Luxembourgish state is facing similar challenges than private companies or the private sector in recruiting people. And obviously it's also a question of budget, and there, as you know, a ministry is always dependent on the Ministry of Finances to get a certain amount of people to deal with all these procedures. So we are fully aware that we need to progress on that, and we have also to simplify the demands via the digital way. And I think that they're talking about digitalization, which is not a green ministry, just to clarify that. I think we are still behind things. I think the whole process with the My Guichet.lu is working good, but in terms of seeing which document and which form is where at which administration, we are not there yet. And I think it would be much helpful for all of us if we are in a process to see, okay, my document is currently in this administration. Afterwards, it will go to that one. And even though it will still take some time, we know, okay, someone is dealing with it, because at the moment you hand in a form and you don't know what's happening. And this is, you know, messing a bit with our minds. And I think there we have to do some progress, and that again, I think is the competence of a digitalization ministry where we still have some work to do.
May I just ask a little question to Mr. Cruchten, because I was surprised in one of the first interviews that your main candidate, Paulette Lehnert, gave to a newspaper. She said that the Simplification administrative is one of her main topics. I was surprised to find that with the Social Democrats as one of the priorities on your list. Is it so bad?
I think that when it comes to election time, many things become priorities. But I do agree that we...
That's honest.
I do agree that especially during COVID, we have made big steps forward in our digital public life. But somehow I have the impression that we stopped afterwards. We were on such a good track. Many things could be dealt with digitally. We learned to do digital conferences, committee meetings in Parliament. We were really things that were not thinkable 2 months before. And I have a bit of the impression that now we are stopping again. And the same counts also for public service. There were big efforts made, and I have sometimes the impression that now it is slowing down, and we should keep that effort up, because other nations, and I suppose we have such an international audience here, they come from many different places, and they can tell that in many other places in Europe they are much further advanced in those processes. I remember in 2002 I went to Tallinn in Estonia, and I wanted to take the tram, and I wanted to pay a ticket, and the person in the coach said to me, "You need to send me an SMS," and I was totally astonished that I should send an SMS to buy a ticket, which took then probably 10 years to be able to enable that function here in Luxembourg. We must admit we are slow.
To be fair, we can say that the Green Minister of Justice just recently brought out a law on associations, where they now make it possible to have reunions. So if you're in some association, you can now have your reunions as a video conference. So that's already some progress made. So let's put that out there. So yeah. So maybe we move on to the next question.
Yeah. So another thing that is concerning a lot of people, and I think it cuts across social classes and employment, and is the cost of living crisis that we're experiencing. I think Luxembourg has relatively low inflation, but as we saw yesterday in the Politmonitor, poverty and the cost of living crisis is one of the main concerns of voters. So what would your party do against combating the cost of living crisis, Mr. Cruchten?
We are just coming from a debate in Parliament that dealt with the working poor, and that was just before I came. And of course, we have to know that even in this rich place that is Luxembourg, we still have to fight to end poverty also in Luxembourg. We have especially the housing problem is causing the people big trouble, not only now, but it has been doing this for years. We as a party, we want to have good working conditions and good wages. But, and we often manage to convince our coalition partners to raise wages, raise the minimum wage, for instance. But what does it help if, on the other hand, the rent is climbing as well? It's eating up all the efforts that we're doing. So actually, it should be a priority to any party that is going to enter next government to tackle the housing crisis. We have to separate the actual crisis from the long-term crisis, and I would like to say that in the past term, a lot has been done. Unfortunately, many of the results of the policies that have been implemented in the past 5 years will show only in a couple of years. We are, and I didn't know that. I was at the Chamber of Commerce, and they told us that we, as in Luxembourg, are the second biggest builder in the Western world. It was the OECD countries. We are behind, was it Singapore? I don't know, but we are building 60% more houses and apartments than the average of the OECD. So it is not the case, it's wrong to say we don't build enough, but we need to make policies, tax policies that encourage flats to be not left empty. We need tax policies to have land that is used and not just lying somewhere and gaining.
We'll get to the housing question later on, because that's very interesting, but we get to that one later. But let's just focus for a little moment on the cost of living again, because I think at least the government parties, we can say, they have the tripartite, so the get-together of the social partners and all the social partners, and they came up with an agreement. And actually, one of the main games one could say was to also influence the cost of living. Now we have statistics that show that actually inflation didn't go down as far as we would have wished maybe. So what else do we have in our repertoire to actually battle this? So we come to housing. I know housing is probably, I think you brought it up because it's a huge part in our basket that we have to, But do you have maybe another point where you could tackle that, Madame Deimes?
I think when mainly it's about housing, where you can, I guess, do a lot of things to help tackle the cost of living. But also, I think this government has also put in place, when I'm talking, for example, thinking about education, a lot of goods in kind. So there is a lot of things like school books that are for free, lunches for children that have become free first in primary school. Then
it's actually surprising because it comes from a democratic party. I thought that you were always for a lean state, not too much influence of the state.
Well, I think that we also very much are in favor of getting every child the same chances to get a good education, and that also means that every child has to have the same conditions, like having the school books that they need, having the free help for doing their homework, having free childcare, at least certain early childhood care. For example, for parents, also be very flexible for parents that have like single parents, or also parents that have working hours that don't really fit into the normal agenda. So that actually we build more maisons relais, so that we get the same chances for every child. We also have after the measures that were taken in the tripartite, we have allowances, what is it in English? The allocation de vie chère, the high cost allowance, the allowance that is given to people who don't have enough money to pay their rent, pay their heat and stuff. And there is another allowance that was decided in the tripartite, that is the energy, the prime énergie. I should know this in English, but I don't. So that is actually an allowance that helps you pay the rent, pay the heating costs. That was actually very important last winter when we didn't know how the prices would actually raise with the war in Ukraine. I think all these measures actually helped all the households a lot to tackle the cost of living. Yes.
So I think there was, you wanted to,
to
join the debate.
Yes, exactly. So, well, it's clear that more and more people have difficulties to make ends meet at the end of the month. That is what we clearly see. For us, tax is clearly a way to help people keep their cost of living, their spending up. Because what happened over the last years is that people got index wages, but the tax system in itself was never really adapted to this increase of the index. So people actually ended up paying more taxes over the past 5 years because we never did those adjustments. We clearly want to do this. We know that it's not something that you can do once at all because it hasn't been done for quite some time. So tax is mainly one. All those measures that have just been mentioned by Mrs. Deimes, and for us it's not selective. We would rather have help people who are actually in need, who can't pay for their school books, who can't pay for their lunch, instead of giving it to everyone. So that's something that we clearly would like to do differently. When you ask us what we would like to do differently, to have a different kind of spending, to be more selective.
So you would cut taxes from most people? Is my understanding correctly?
No, that's not. We would like to. Well, yes, when we do these adjustments, clearly everyone will pay less taxes, and not. They will pay the same amount of taxes they paid 5 years ago. So it's not just about cutting taxes and giving everyone tax cuts. It's really about getting back to the level we actually were a few years ago. On top of that, we will clearly have some very specific measures for people who have children, for people who are on their own with single parents. We would clearly like to target different types of people.
But it would be something really new if a party would now, after the elections, or maybe even before the elections, be so honest and then say, I will cut back subsidies. So do I get it correct that the CSV would actually go and say, we're not going to pay for the school books anymore, we're not going to pay for the kindergartens anymore? That's not
what we're going to do. We would like in the future not to select this kind of distributing money. That's for sure. We know that we do not want to take anything away from anybody, but generally speaking, we would like to avoid these kind of public spending and also have maybe a more reasonable public spending, because we've noticed over the past years that sometimes the government just spent a lot of money on things that were not necessary. A few days ago we had a big debate in the House of Parliament, notably about the spending the government has now done to buy office space for 273 million euros, which is about the amount that they spend every year and that they invest in the Fonds Spécial de Logement. So this is the same amount they spend every year on the housing crisis, which is the most important problem we actually have right now. They spend on one office building to buy office space. So that's something for us that's completely unreasonable and that we did not agree with.
Mr. Cruchten wants to just intervene. Please keep it short because I've got another question. Okay.
I'm just saying that what Mrs. Margue has been saying about cutting taxes, general tax cut, that will profit most those who earn a lot, and very little those who earn very little, and not at all those who don't even pay taxes, which are also a lot of people, and those are the ones that we also need to care about, because those who don't pay taxes are very often those who have the very smallest income and the very poorest living conditions. So I don't agree with you, and I also don't agree with this idea of this. Is it called trickle-down economics? We cut taxes for everyone, and in the end, the poor people will also benefit from it. This story has been told to us by Mrs. Thatcher and Mr. Reagan since the 80s, and it has never worked, and it will also not work in Luxembourg.
So there's a clear difference between the two parties. That's nice to hear, because sometimes you get the feeling everybody's just in the consensus. I've got another question for you, Madame Margue, because you didn't really have the chance yet to maybe develop some of the arguments. You already said one of the biggest social questions of the present in Luxembourg is actually the housing crisis. So how do we create enough affordable housing? And what framework conditions does your party suggest so that we can do adequate construction and also construction in time? Because I know that there are a lot of projects on the way, that's what they always tell us, but there is pressure. We can see it. We can see that more and more Luxembourgish people, not Luxembourgish nationality, but people from Luxembourg now are moving into the greater region. So there really is an urgency there. So what can we do to tackle it and not come up with, again, a long plan that's going to take 10 or 15 years to actually be implemented?
So it's clear that it's not one measure that will solve the housing crisis, that's for sure, so we have to act on different levels. What our aim should be is to have more offer of housing. That's eventually what we aim at. How do we do this? On the one hand, of course, we increase public spending, and we have the state and the communes act also as developers and create housing. However, and that's more probably what distinguishes us from the other parties, is that we also want to have an environment that is favorable to the development of private projects, because private developers, they are able to realize real estate projects in a much quicker way, and that's for us certainly something we need to do. We need to have also, because public developers, they can benefit from different subsidies if they create affordable housing, and we would like to extend these subsidies to private developers, of course under the condition that they really develop affordable housing. And
but just to add a thing, because wasn't the housing market actually very much run by private initiatives? And my question would be, and I don't give it only to you, but maybe also to Mrs. Deimes, isn't it not the time maybe for the public sector to step up and build more affordable houses and then manage it itself? Because I remember that the Minister of Housing just recently had a press conference, and I think he also gave us some numbers on how much of housing is actually in hand of the public. It is not a lot. I remember maybe something like 2%. It was really, really low if you compare it. Germany has in the last years also slashed the public housing. It's by around 7%. But if you take, for example, a country that has a lot of tradition already in public housing, like Switzerland, for example, you get higher numbers, at least like 2 counts of numbers. So, because I always, I heard, I think I even remember that Lydie Polfer was actually one of those politicians that said, no, the market is going to do it. And we've been listening to this kind of motto for over 20 or 30 years, and still we have not solved that crisis.
No, I think I could agree with you as a Democratic Party representative to say that we need to have more projects built by the public hand, that also the public sector should buy projects on the private market and to compensate for the lack of private investment. And there is also an idea that the party president, like Stalis, came up with recently, the idea of a citizen fund to mobilize private savings, but to make the state buy housing, build housing, construct housing, but then to have private investments and you have actually also an income return, so it actually functions like on a regular market, but it's just like less income return than on a private market. But I think that Yves Cruchten mentioned, or you asked the questions before about the administrative procedures, and I also think that administrative simplification also comes into this, when we think about once you give, for example, an authorization to construct something in a place, and there has not been any construction in 1 or 2 years, so you don't have to ask for that authorization again. But it's something that is then still valid. That is one thing. The other thing would be that if you introduce an application to construct something and there is no return in a certain amount of time, that you have a tacit agreement. So you have these procedures. When you think about this Wohnen op der Wals, or the Wohnen op der Wals, this Almond project and others, they have been on the way for years and years, for decades, and there's still nothing happened. So that is something we have to be faster and also with more density.
Let me just give a little picture to the audience, because when Yannick and I prepared for this debate, we looked into one ranking that was very interesting. It is actually a ranking of the view of expats on different countries and why they would come and why they would maybe leave. And when we looked into it, the housing and also the cost of living was actually a reason why Luxembourg in the ranking really lost ranks. So there's an issue there. If we combine that with the other question that we just discussed, the question of staff that we want to attract, the question of growth, so we need the people, then there's really some urgency. So I will be very curious to find some of your solutions then later on in the party programs, I hope.
Yeah, I guess we could also extend the question to Mrs. Bauer of the Green Party, because also, there's now some reforms in the works to mobilize empty land and empty flats and to increase taxation on that. But I also think that according to some studies, like that sort of tax on speculation on investors in the real estate market who just cling to their lands in order to increase its value is probably not enough in the long term to actually make those people, despite the recent drop in real estate prices, to make them maybe build more or sell it. What is your solution on the? What sort of solution do you propose on the housing market to ensure that prices stay affordable, that we keep attracting foreign talent, but also that the population that is already here can actually afford to live here?
Well, I mean, we all agree that the housing ministry was not the one where people were like saying, "Hi, I want this. This is really the most easiest and attractive ministry to get." And I think we took on the challenge, and I think it's the most worrisome topic for many of us here, for a whole Luxembourg society. We saw it recently, and it has been said by Yves Cruchten. Unfortunately, it's a topic where you don't see the quick results, the quick fixes, the low-hanging fruits it takes some time to construct and to build, and this is a reality. But at least I think that we have really done something. From 40 million in 2017, we today in 2023 invest 173 million euros into housing, and it's planned to spend over 300 million into housing here in Luxembourg. So this increase and this taking over responsibility as a state, I think it's much needed. We all know that the private sector couldn't deal with the housing crisis, and I think this government agreed that taking over a responsibility from a public sector was a needed thing. We have 10 big public housing developments that have been voted with over 3,300 affordable homes that are in construction right now, and we have the Pacte Logement 3.0, the second Pacte Logement, which basically is a response to what you say, okay, private sector is not involved enough. I disagree. We have a Pacte Logement where every private housing development has to include affordable homes. So it is happening. There are still private investments, but we say, okay, we just don't leave it to the market, with the results that we have been seeing in the past years. But we say a certain percentage has to be into affordable homes. So the public sector is taking over responsibility, and obviously it takes some time until we see the results, but at least I think that this government has been tackling a problem where before we just left it to the private market, and that clearly didn't work out.
Unfortunately, we have to cut you short.
Just very quickly.
Very quickly.
With the Parc Logement, a certain percentage of housing has to be sold to the municipalities, so they will have to actually do to manage this project. So it's not that what actually makes the private developers construct more. That's not what's going to happen. And one more figure, just we talk about 200 million, 300 million. It's 1% of the budget. That's not enormous, and it took them 6 years to actually increase the amount.
That's a fair point.
From 2006.
Yeah. Thank you. We have to move on because we also want you guys to have a chance to also get remaining of some questions later on from politicians. But let me move to another aspect I think that is important. I know sometimes in my former life as a journalist in another newspaper, I discussed it with him already, the question of education. So education, having education institutions in the country is really important location factor for businesses. A lot has been done, we can agree on that, I think, when it comes to private, international and public schools in the recent years. But we actually now moved into a scenario where we have international public schools and we have the actual public system. So let me just ask the question, first of all, is this way the right way also for the Luxemburger here? Are we not risking to have like a two directions in a system that will maybe not be very how to say that, not be very positive for integration? That's the one question. And the other question, maybe just to add it, is it enough? When we come to the question of, we look at our population, we've got very young people, we've got a lot of expats still moving in, so there's a lot of growth still. So yeah, how do we tackle the educational question? So I don't know who wants to take that question first. Maybe I'll go with Mr. Cruchten. Yeah, well, the education is actually something from the Social Democrats, no?
Yes.
It used to be.
No, I agree. I think having these public international schools is a real good thing. That is, that we insisted on. We should not leave this also to the private sector. And it is not only a big demand from people living here, and also from people coming from abroad who want to do their living here. But I also think it's a necessity because our public Luxembourg school system is not fair to people coming in it from abroad. And we have been talking about this for years and decades, and many efforts have been made, and I must say many different parties have been trying different things, and we still have not been able to make the regular Luxembourgish public school a fair school for everyone. There are still efforts, there are still reforms being done, it's going step by step, but we must all admit that you're still privileged when you come from a Luxembourgish family, you are a native speaker, and you are at ease with the system that is in Luxembourgish German and French, later on English, and those coming from abroad often have difficulties, and therefore this is a continuous effort that also then the next governments will have to attack.
Isn't there a risk that this could fragment society because people end up in different linguistic bubbles?
Yes, but as far as I know, and I hear there's also a big demand from Luxembourgish native families to have their children go into international schools because they want them to learn and to have exchanges with different people from different nationalities and origins, and learning all these, especially English language, big focus on that. So I'm confident that this could be also a solution that would help this integration process.
So the LSRP would keep the international public school?
Yes, definitely.
I don't know about you, but I remember having lost quite some of my classmates on my way through the secondary school because they were not fit enough in English or in German. And I met them many years afterwards, and they told me that actually it had a very big effect on their career afterwards. And I think I'm very happy that we have this school system, and I think it's a little too early now to take any to evaluate the system.
Actually, there will be a press conference tomorrow with the Ministry of Education, and it will be the first time that they will publish results from EBSTAN on the public international schools. So keep your ears open. It will be very interesting to see.
We have had 6 of them since 2016, and I think it's a very nice effort. And I also have been asked the question: is this not actually creating a bubble where you keep people from integrating? But on the other hand, I think that no, because allowing them to go to a public school, Luxembourgers and others, because otherwise Luxembourgers didn't really go to European schools or international schools, but now they can actually mix, and they can integrate and promote this. It's a good promotion of the living together in Luxembourg to have public schools where you have people from abroad. And also maybe a last sentence: you have so many people coming here to Luxembourg, maybe always planning to, I'm going to stay for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And then you see them 20, 30 years afterwards, and they liked it so much. You see so often people who said that they didn't plan to stay here, they still stayed here. And I think it's very important for their children to go to a public school, so to have this mix with other children, to also not stay in their bubble, but go and mix with everybody.
You wanted to add?
Yeah, many true things have been said, but let's be honest with something. The Luxembourgish school system is quite reform resistant, and that's also a fact. And at some point,
good to hear it.
Yeah. We're among us, right? But in the end, we need reforms in our school system, and I think it was quite tough and challenging to put forward fast enough reforms and modernizing our school system in the very classical public school sector. And international school made it possible to have another forms of education, the whole day school approach, different languages, the alphabetization. They found solutions to problems that have been in the room, like an elephant in the room in the public sector, and they changed things. And now there is obviously some pressure on the public school system to get going and move on and adapt the well-done reforms that have been done in the public international schools. So I think it's about learning from each other and putting the two systems closer together, because I think the classic Luxembourgish system can only take profit from the best practices that are working well in the international schools, and vice versa. And I think we have to move them closer together, and both are legitimate, but we really should be aware of not driving into separate directions, but moving them closer together with the best practices learned from both systems.
Let me just add one thing, because we have to move on. We have one more topic that we want to touch, and then give the audience the voice. And we could maybe combine education here with the other topic, participation. Because if you look into expat forums, and there are quite a few, you can see them on Facebook, for example, there are different groups, and you listen to what they put in there, there is a lot of complaints when it comes to childcare facilities and school facilities in Luxembourg, and the participation of parents, the actual way of connecting, of interacting, of knowing what's going on in the schools. So I would like to, maybe because you wanted to, I think, take position to the education question, so maybe you could also answer that. What kind of participation model can we implement in schools? Because I think that was quite, I think it was a quite exact photo of our school system. It's very rigid, it's very top down, and there's not a lot of participation and exchange going on, and input from outside.
I think education is one of the most tricky subjects, basically because everyone in his life was at some point confronted to education. So it's clear that it's very the stakeholders are very resistant to change. But just also to make one statement, however, on state schools, I mean, it's for sure that our objective should be to have strong state schools, and this is why we need to evolve, and we need to take into account the multiplicity of our society. We need to rethink language learning, alphabetization. That's certainly something we need to do, because private schools are expensive, and we want all the children to have the same opportunities, and this is why we need to adapt the state system so that children also can learn a language in a way that is appropriate for them in state schools. Of course, we need to, and that's also probably the reason why we need to talk more to parents, to understand also their needs, to be able to actually have a program that corresponds to the need of the children. If we go, on the other hand, a way where we just keep adding more European schools, especially European schools, because the state does not have a say on the curriculum, so the state cannot at all intervene to have, to say something on the curriculum. We really need to make sure that we try to gather people instead of having, as Djuna just mentioned, two different worlds where people grow up.
Yeah, so the language question, you brought it up, I believe, is of course one of the recurring themes in Luxembourgish politics and elections, and for Luxembourgers it's obviously easier to learn German and than English and French, for instance, whereas for certain communities with a foreign background it might be easier to learn French. And now with English becoming more predominant, what do you see as like the main language for education in Luxembourg in the future, or is there even such a thing as a main language?
Well, there has been a pilot project to have children learn how to read and write in French. I mean, what we clearly want to do is an assessment of how this works. Has it worked? If we go this way, we also need to do certain adaptations later on, because when people learn to read and write in French, they will obviously, it will be easier for them also to learn geography and biology in French. So we need to rethink the whole system until the end, and not just have people learn how to read and write in French. And what we also need to take into account that it's a foreign language. I mean, in Luxembourg, people who grow up with Luxembourgish, when they learn how to read in French, it's a foreign language. And this should also have an impact on how we teach them how to learn to read and write.
But language is also a very important factor when it comes to participation, just to pick that up, because if you think about schools and you have the big school meetings and you want to inform parents, I see that in most of the public schools, the meetings will still be in French, although we know that the English community, the English-speaking community, is really growing, and it's growing fast. So what about, when we, let's touch a little bit this topic of participation, because we're here with a lot of people, I think, that come from different countries. How can we make places like schools, but also other places, more inclusive language-wise? Would we then have to offer more, is it more English everywhere, meetings in English, translation in English?
If you allow me, I just had a very interesting conversation about this at our party congress, because, I'm from the Green Party and we are having more and more English-speaking members. They tell me, okay, we are communicating in German and in French, but there is a higher demand on having English-speaking forums and English-speaking newsletters, etc. So this is a question, if we talk about participation, it takes place in our schools, but also in the clubs, in the local NGOs, but also in politics. And I mean, participation in the end is a place where everyone can contribute and finds his spot, and language shouldn't be an excluding factor. So I think it's definitely a question that all of us have to challenge ourselves, and I think that the classical Luxembourgish way in communicating in Luxembourgish and maybe in French at some point won't be enough. And if we want to include everyone and also those who only speak English, well, we all have to make an effort, and I think that's the same for us as parties, for schools, for clubs. And if we lack volunteers, if we lack people who want to engage themselves, well, we have to tackle the language question. That's clear for me.
you just mentioned something very interesting, namely that there's more, let's say, English speakers getting involved in politics, joining the Green Party, and certainly also other parties. And we just had communal elections where all foreigners, regardless of whether they were EU citizens or regardless of how long they've lived in the country, were able to participate, to vote. Whereas we had the referendum several years ago, 2014, is that right? 15 years. About granting, the right to vote to foreigners in national elections, which would, of course, enable full participation as residents and as citizens in the country. So, is that a topic that is dead in your opinion because the people voted against it, or is there something that you foresee to maybe change in the future? That this is a question that will come back to.
But maybe give the question to Madame Deimes, because I just recently joined an evening with Xavier Bettel, and there was somebody, an English-speaking woman in the audience, that asked the question, and he said, "Well, that question is solved." So is it really answered?
You mean the question is solved?
Yeah, so there's not going to be any referendum again. So the question of having voting rights on the national level, that one seems to be closed for him.
I think we all know the result, and it was pretty clear. And I think that there's everybody knows that having one referendum before having another one, you need to do a lot of work to somehow. People still have not forgotten what happened in 2015.
Yeah, but maybe you didn't prepare well.
That is another question, and I couldn't agree more. I think it was very, very. It was not well prepared. But I think that in the meantime, I mean, there has been a way to somehow than the other time. But I would rather say, hey, we had a very large national campaign, I Can Vote, for the local elections. We had a very good.
That's also debatable, right? The large campaign is debatable.
Well, the campaign was very large. It's always about communication and how does it get to those people who should hear about it. And I mean, it was in 5 languages. You were talking about languages. What languages should be addressed in Luxembourg, and Portuguese was one of the languages, but also English is a very important language because it's the one that most people then understand. Does it get to everybody? I don't know, but I think that this communication problem is actually a problem that is one that is very, very important. How do we make sure that communication, that information gets to each and everybody? And I think that the municipalities play a very big role also in this, to communicate to people, to tell them that you can actually participate. Ms. Berner just talked about volunteering. Also volunteering. How can you participate? We had a very interesting study 2 years ago where people said that they would actually like to participate way more, but they didn't know how and where to go and ask for that. So that is also, I think we as a government also have to make sure that people get the right information, to make sure that they know how to get involved, how to participate, and if they get interested in what happens in their daily life, which is actually at municipal level first, then they should register for the municipal elections, which is already a good way to participate. And then maybe, I don't know in what time frame we're talking, we can ask again for going that big step further to have that national participation.
I think Mr. Cruchten wanted to add something. Please keep it short, because now we want to give it back to the audience.
I really think it's a big shame that we screwed this up in 2015. We were so sure that we would win that popular vote, and it was absolutely the opposite. I think, and I'm pretty sure that whoever is going to be the next prime minister, she will be asked next year, or in the upcoming year, when going to Brussels, whom are you representing? You are representing a minority in your own country. And latest that moment, we have to bring this up again and put it back on the table.
Thank you. That's such a good point for ending this debate here, the panel debate. We will open the floor now for your questions. So go ahead. There will be microphones. Just raise your hand and then we'll pass the microphone. Please be specific whom to address with your question. And let it be a question, not a too long statement, so that we can gather a lot of questions. We don't have too much time, and I think people are thirsty and want to drink something too. So.
Thank you so much. I actually have two questions, and I cannot address it to one person specifically, but just let you choose. So actually, I'm a farmer, and I'm very concerned about, personally concerned about, or happy actually, that we don't have the data center, neither the yogurt factory here in Luxembourg. And you know why? Because of the water. No? We are facing 5 years of drought, which makes growing of food very difficult. It has also a huge impact on biodiversity. Last year already, the government was talking to take the water out of the Moselle. I don't know if you forgot about that, no? But in France also now they're discussing their distribution struggles have started. No? So my first question will be, how will the government solve water issues if we are facing like 1 million citizens under climate change? Question number one. Question number two, talking about growth, I'm actually missing that we never talk about resources. Resources means for me food, and it means nature. No? But agriculture is never a topic in public discussions of growth and sustainability. Like when we had COVID, the borders closed, and actually Luxembourg is importing, for example, 95% of its veggies. How do you deal with the question of food? How does the government deal with the question of food sufficiency, knowing that many farmers also actually stop because they are tired and they can't deal with it anymore? So, and as you know, food is not growing in supermarkets. So those two questions, the water and the agriculture, please.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. You will not be happy with my answer, because I will tell you that we don't have shortage of water here. We have drought, that's true, and you are suffering from it, and our nature is suffering from it. But in our region, we have no shortage of water. We are consuming, the industry is now consuming a third of the water it was consuming back in the 70s. We are dropping drinking water into our rivers during 10 months a year, because we are producing too much drinking water. So we don't have a shortage. We have these periods in June, July, when 4 weeks of slow rain comes. Then we have momentarily problems to, and the government calls the people don't wash your car and so on. But in the end, we don't have shortage of water. So I don't really believe in the fact that we should not have industries anymore because of the water issue. And you rightfully mentioned that there's more possibilities to get water. But on the other hand, you're also right, we have to be responsible with all our resources. That counts for water, that counts for many other natural resources that we have, and that is a goal that we should all set, and I actually think that all the political parties want to achieve that goal. So, and also let me tell you, because I couldn't say it in the very beginning, I am not afraid of the 1 million people Luxembourg. I'm absolutely not afraid of it. Our neighboring country, Saarland, has 1 million citizens, and they are not sitting on each other's lap. There is space in this country. We sometimes give the impression that this country is so tiny and so small that we don't have place for all those people. But when you look out of the window when taking the airplane and leaving from Findel, you can see that this country has lots of place, lots of spaces inside the cities and inside the villages to build, to create, to grow and to evolve. So that was a message that I wanted to give, that I am not afraid of the 1 million people in Luxembourg.
Get another answer.
Yeah.
We'll move on, please, because the other ones want to.
I think that we should worry, though, about the quality of our waters. And we have ammoniac and nitrates, and I don't know all the chemical words in English, but I think we need to be very much aware of what the quality of our waters are. And I thank you for mentioning this, because I think that agriculture needs to be our ally in this, as we know that there are some I was not prepared to use the fertilizers that are harming our nature. So we have to be on the same side of the battle there, and we have to rethink of how our agriculture works. We have to support them also in this transition, but it's I see clearly the way of how agriculture works is that we are allies in the question of our biodiversity and in our resource question, because in the end it's the agriculture, the farmers that will notice firsthand the repercussions of climate change and the biodiversity crisis that is happening. They see it first, and I think we have to be on the same side there in fighting this, and I think therefore we have to question also the way of how we farm, how corporations work, and how the whole impact on biodiversity and resources are. So thank you for mentioning the question, because I think it's very closely linked.
Can we take the next question, please?
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists, firstly. Just to go first on education, so from personal background, I'm a teacher in an international school. Just to go back to what Madame Margue said, there was a small point that you said that's not quite true. Luxembourg does have a say with the curriculum, because the education ministers from the European countries meet with the EURSC. So there is a small say there. Granted, the curriculum change is difficult, but that's difficult in Luxembourg as well. Also, if you look at the IB, that's also very difficult curriculum to change, and that's highly respected internationally as well. I think just on the question, what support can be put for Lux natives? We have a lot of Lux natives that cross over, so there obviously is a problem in the national system if they are crossing over. And taxation.
Crossing over into international.
They're crossing over into international. We're seeing it. It's happening, and it's a lot. The second point, taxation. So again, I'm not targeting you, but you mentioned about public spending. So the question, and you said it was too high in your view. So I think the question for the panel is: has the panel got any suggestions about increasing taxation on investment profits, especially for the highest earners or people that are exchanging the highest amount of shares? Because obviously if you tax that higher, then that would produce the state revenue needed, which could allow you to build more affordable housing and increase public spending because you've increased taxation.
So we start with Madame Margue, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then I'm interested to see what the panel's view is on taxation, especially investment profit taxation, which I think might be interesting for DP and TSFAL. Thank you.
It's very regrettable that a lot of people who started in the Luxembourg system actually switched to an international system, and that's why we need to adapt the Luxembourg system, because we need to understand also why are they moving, and then you can tell me afterwards, and then try to evolve. Regarding taxation, we do not have any specific plans on rising taxes on investments. However, when we look at individual taxation, we want to add an additional tax brackets as from 500,000 euros, and we want to have a tax rate at 43%. Why are we not going above? Because we clearly think it's also a matter of competitiveness, and we want to be not at a higher level than our neighboring countries, because we still need, when we talk about talent attraction, and we have talked a lot about talent attractions, we clearly need to remain attractive, and when I mentioned this, we also want to extend prime participative, to have more people in the company actually benefiting from the benefits that have been realized by the company. That's clearly also a way of how to associate people in the benefits that have been made.
Thank you. Finally, I was not aware that I would meet someone in a bank that would call for more taxing. I'm very glad that you said this. Even though I must say we of course we have a we are depending so much in Luxembourg of the financial sector that we also have to be cautious in what we do. I must tell you, I'm very satisfied or very happy that I would not have believed that it would have been possible that we have found agreements on European level for minimum taxation. That was unthinkable a couple of years ago, but there has been agreements, and now we have first steps in minimal taxation in Europe. That it's going to be a good thing, and I also think that the initiatives that are taken now by Mr. Macron, for instance, to bring back financial transaction taxes in a form or another back on the agenda is also a good sign, and that is something we should not be blocking at Luxembourg, but we should actively be helping to establish. When it is done all in over Europe, then we don't have to speak about the disadvantages. Maar dat is maar concurrentie.
Competition.
Level playing field, that was level playing field, thank you. Then we don't have to worry about the level playing field. I was sure I would never have to say that word.